Greetings class and welcome to Accounting 202. This is an announcement video for week 4. Now we just finished chapter 3 yesterday. The homework, foundational 15 and other material was due yesterday. We just wrapped that up. This was the job order cost flows chapter. And now we're moving to the next module for week 4, which is exam number 1. Now in this module I have several things here for you. I just kind of want to walk through those. The first page is instructions for week 4 module exam number 1, and when you open this you'll see something like this where you have basically the steps you need to do. There's an exam 1 study guide. I'll talk about that in just a minute. There are review videos for both multiple choice type problems and open-ended problems. There will be both types on the exam. So you want to watch the review videos for those. There are materials with those that include the questions in a worksheet that you can follow along with. The third thing you want to do is practice the review problems using that Excel worksheet that's there. For the fourth item here, you need to prepare a 3x5 note card with formulas and definitions for the exam. So I'll talk more about that in a minute, but for the 3x5 card you need to put important formulas and definitions on there if you're having trouble remembering those things, and I'll talk about those when we go through the study guide. The fifth item here is review the instructions for downloading and using the Respondus lockdown browser. If you haven't used it yet, you'll need to look at that document. It has some links in it that you can go to the website where you download the Respondus browser. Once you download it, I have a practice exam here in the module that you can take with questions that are similar to what you might see on the exam, and you can do this practice exam multiple times. So this is basically for you to become comfortable with the lockdown browser and to practice actually your knowledge and understanding for the test. And then you'll need to take exam 1 by Sunday, February the 6th. That exam will become available on Wednesday, tomorrow, February the 2nd, and it'll be available until Sunday, February the 6th at 11:59 p.m. The eighth item here is afterwards, after the exam is graded and everything's in, we'll have the opportunity to do exam corrections, and we will do that after everybody's taken the exam. So once everybody's completed the exam, I'll unlock it so you can go back in and review those exam results, prepare corrections, and then submit those through an upload link. And I'll go back and regrade the tests. Through these exam corrections, you have the opportunity to add a few points back to your exam score. So these are the instructions for the module, okay? This is the study guide, and this is what I want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about here. I have the study guide loaded here. So this is how I've set up the study guide, and you need to kind of go through this, and that's why we did the vocabulary exercise at the beginning of the semester. So in this exam study guide, you notice we have the terminology here, like the activity base. And that was the first item on the vocabulary worksheet that you had to define. So you'll want to be familiar with these terms and know what they include or what they are, and you know how they're used in managerial accounting. So understanding that the activity base, like in the first example, if you go to the glossary, it says that this activity base is a statistical measure that you use to allocate cost to a cost object. And the example they give is to understand the cost of surgical gloves You would need to know the number of procedures performed in a surgical, basically a surgery center or something like that, or surgery room, and that would tell you, that would be the base that you could use to drive the cost of gloves, because if you're doing more surgeries, you're going to use more gloves. So that's an example. Anyway, the terminology here is stuff we've worked with for the first three chapters. The first one, activity base, administrative costs. Just know that these are not product costs, they're period costs. So they're period costs, which means they occur, they're not assigned to a specific product, but they occur every accounting period. The contribution margin income statement, or the contribution format, is simply the sales minus variable cost, all variable cost, to give you the contribution margin. And that contribution margin here is what you have left over after you pay for the variable cost to cover all the fixed overhead costs you have. Cost behavior, this one is either going to be, when we talk about cost behavior, we're talking about either fixed cost or variable cost. Fixed cost stays, the total fixed cost will stay consistent regardless of the level of production. So it doesn't matter what level of production you're at, the fixed cost will always be the same in total. The variable cost, however, will be the same per unit, but the more production you have, the greater the cost will be. Cost object is basically anything you want to find out information about for costs. And then we talk about differential cost and revenue. This is the cost and revenue that it takes to make one more item. So a differential cost, it's more than that actually. Differential cost would be the difference between two possible opportunities. So the cost that would differ between these options. We'll get more into this later in the course, but a differential cost would be a cost that you would incur if you chose a particular option. Differential revenue, the same thing. Direct cost, direct labor, and direct materials, all those are associated with a product. I've already mentioned fixed costs. Incremental cost, this is what I was talking about with differential. Incremental is the cost, the incremental cost is the cost that it takes to make one more item, one more product. Indirect cost of labor and indirect materials, these are the components of manufacturing overhead. Just know that these indirect costs cannot be assigned directly to a product, that these are going to be placed in overhead and allocated. The product costs that are inventoriable are going to be basically direct materials, direct labor, and applied overhead. So we have applied overhead that we're going to apply throughout the period. These product costs are always going to be direct materials, direct labor, and applied overhead. Managerial accounting, just know what the discipline is, that we're focused on internal reporting, that manufacturing overhead is everything, all manufacturing costs except direct materials and direct labor. The opportunity cost is a cost you give up for a certain opportunity to take advantage of an opportunity. So you may lose some revenues if you go in one direction, and that would be an opportunity cost. Period costs are not assignable to any product. These occur regardless of the level of production. These are administrative and selling costs. Product costs are always going to be related to a specific product. These are going to be, again, direct materials, direct labor, and applied overhead. Those kind of costs are going to be associated with a product. A relevant range is going to be a range where you have a minimum level of production and a maximum level of production where the assumptions do not change. In other words, the variable cost per unit doesn't change. on a per unit basis, although in total it would, and the fixed cost in total would not change. Selling costs, those are again a period cost, like administrative costs that are associated with selling products. A sunk cost is anything that you've already incurred, like a piece of equipment or something like that. Variable cost is a cost that's directly associated with a product, and it doesn't change on a per unit basis, but it will in total. The allocation base is very similar to an activity base. So an allocation base that we're using here, although an activity base is broader than this definition I'm about to give you, the allocation base we use in these chapters is going to be either direct labor hours or machine hours, and those are used to allocate manufacturing overhead. So what we're doing is we're calculating an overhead rate based on direct labor hours and machine hours, which is the allocation base, and then applying overhead on that. A cost driver is anything that drives the cost of a product. So the example up here was the surgical gloves. Those are going to be a cost driver. Job order costing is what we're doing now in these chapters 2 and 3, and that's for that's going to be for products that vary a great deal from one to the next. So we're going to have multiple products that vary a great deal. All right, so we're not going to be manufacturing the same product all the time. We'll have multiple products, and sometimes, many times, these products are custom made. So we have customers who are ordering these, and these may be custom made. So anyway, that's what that is, all right? And then we have multiple predetermined overhead rates. When we talk about this, we're talking about departmental overhead rates, which means we have two departments, and we're going to use different ways of applying overhead in each. So these departmental overhead rates are customized for the department. So if there's a department that has a lot of machine hours, does a lot with machining, you would definitely want to use machine hours. But if a department was very labor intensive, machine hours wouldn't make any sense. Overhead application is just when we take the predetermined overhead rate times whatever the activity level is for a specific job. So if a job had 100 direct labor hours and we were using direct labor hours as a rate, we would take the rate times those 100 hours to find out how much cost we had in that job for overhead. The plant-wide overhead rate is different from the multiple predetermined. A plant-wide rate basically takes all departments and averages them together. The predetermined overhead rate can be either plant-wide or departmental. It doesn't matter, but a predetermined overhead rate is what you use to apply overhead. And the last thing here is about over or under applied overhead. What is that? Basically the difference between what you've applied using the rate and what you've actually incurred. Okay, those are definitional, and a lot of these kind of questions that are conceptual and definitional will be in the multiple choice. Open-ended questions, you'll find things like this, and you may have some multiple choice where you have to do a product cost, period cost, or something like that. But you need to be able to compute product costs and period costs and know the difference. Identify the difference between direct cost and indirect cost. So basically, what is direct cost? What is indirect? Direct cost is going to be anything that goes into the product. Indirect would be something that you would use that doesn't actually become a part of the product, but it's a part of the production process. For example, I mentioned in my example of the epoxy factory, we used a lot of solvents and protective equipment And those would all be indirect costs. Those were not direct costs. We had to use those in production, but we were not actually putting those into products. All right, you'll have to be able to calculate, or should be able to calculate, total manufacturing cost. This one's a big one right here. Calculate applied overhead and total product cost. On this exam, exam 1, I can tell you that you'll need to be able to calculate the applied overhead or the overhead rate. We've done a lot with that in these last 3 chapters. Calculate per unit manufacturing cost based on product cost and units manufactured. Identify the inventory accounts used in job order costing. Remember the 3 inventory accounts we talked about? We're going to have raw materials. We're going to have work in process. And we're going to have finished goods. These 3 inventory accounts are where we track the costs for the products we make. So raw materials, work in process, and finished goods. Basically, know these 3 and what they are. In the raw materials, we have the materials we are going to put into the product but haven't yet. Work in process is anything that's underway in the current production cycle. And finished goods is anything that's ready to sell. The journal entries we did in Chapter 3, you'll need to know those. They reflect the flow of cost in a job order system. And there is an example in the multiple choice review where you have to identify the correct journal entry. Be able to calculate the cost of goods manufactured. Now, I'm going to tell you that we're not going to have you prepare a cost of goods manufactured statement, but understand what goes into cost of goods manufactured. So, for example, in your note card, I mentioned you want to have specific formulas. So, one of those would be the predetermined overhead rate, and you could say that is equal to estimated total overhead cost divided by estimated total activity base, which in this case it will be either direct labor hours or machine hours. Okay, so that would be a good example of one to put up here. Another one would be calculating the cost of goods manufactured. So if we're calculating cost of goods manufactured, we're going to start with beginning work in process. We'll start with beginning work in process. We'll add in direct materials from the raw materials inventory. We'll add in direct labor. We'll add in applied overhead. And after all of these 3, we'll have total manufacturing costs. And so we've taken beginning work in process plus these, we have total manufacturing costs. And then we're going to deduct out ending work in process. And that will give us, then, I should have put this over here. Hang on. This should be right here, ending work in process. So when we subtract that out, then we have underneath here, the final total will be cost of goods manufactured. So this is a good thing to put on your note card as well. Be able to know what goes into that. Other things that are going to be important. Remember when we started, I said, okay, remember this formula, y equals a plus bx. That is the way we calculate total overhead cost, where we have a is the fixed overhead, b is the overhead rate, and x is the level of activity. So there are several things like this you want on your note card. All right, the last one is calculating the cost of goods sold for a job. And with this one, this is going to be a lot like the cost of goods manufactured here. We did cost of goods sold when we were in Accounting 201, but cost of goods sold here are going to be beginning finished goods, inventory. We're going to add cost of goods manufactured. Then we have cost of goods available for sale. And then we deduct out ending. So we take cost of goods sold as beginning finished goods plus cost of goods manufactured minus ending finished goods inventory. And that gives you cost of goods sold. All right. So these are some things you might want to have on your note card. Also, any definitions that you have trouble remembering or you get easily mixed up, put those on there too. If you have a 3x5 card, you'll need to show it to the camera when you're getting ready to take the exam. But you do have the 3x5 card available for notes. So you can make as many notes as you can on it. The thing is, you need to be able to see and read them and easily find them. So make sure they're things that you're going to use. All right, the last thing that I wanted to talk about here and in this module, we are going to use the Respondus Lockdown Browser. And for anybody who's been taking courses over the last 2 years, you know what this is. You may be new to it, I don't know, but I'm going to go through it here again just in case. This document includes information about how to get the Respondus Lockdown Browser. When you open it up, it'll look like this. You have instructions for downloading and setting up the browser in this document. So there's a link here. This will take you to the place where you can download and install the browser. So you need, if you don't have it yet, download it and install it on your computer. Also, here's a checklist. So you want to make sure that the lockdown browser and webcam on your computer are set up correctly. So you need to do the following steps just to make sure that you have that you're running the webcam check, running the system and network check, and making sure that it's going to work the way that you need it to. Now, if you run into problems, I'm not an expert on the lockdown browser, but these folks are at the help desk. So if you have any problems with the lockdown browser, use this link, or you can call this number for Canvas support and talk to somebody there who can help you with those. Now, just a few pointers. When you're taking an online exam, you want to be in a place where you won't be interrupted. You want to turn off other devices. You want to make sure that the place that you're taking the test is well lit so your face is visible. You'll also want to clear your desk or table, wherever you're taking this, of any other materials that aren't permitted for the exam. So in this exam, you can't have books, papers, and other devices, but you can have a note card. I will say this, you can have a blank piece of scratch paper, and at the end of the exam, you need to show that you're tearing it up. Hold it up to the camera and show that you're tearing it up. Before starting the test, know how much time is available for it. and that you've allotted enough time to do it. You'll also need to remain at your computer for the time that you're taking the test. Now, here is, and these are some other pointers for webcam systems issues and questions. Just know that while you are taking the exam, there is a webcam video that's being made of you taking the exam, and that's just a basic. Well, it's a part of the lockdown browser, so it's just basically an online proctoring system. So here is a video you can watch that'll explain the lockdown browser a little more. And then there's also a quick start guide here where you can click on this document and download it and take a look at what the folks that Respondus have said. And then here, the very last thing is the academic ethics policy, that basically we're your work is your work. We're pursuing honesty, trust, and personal responsibility, and this academic dishonesty won't be acceptable. Look, I've never had a problem with this. I don't expect I will this time. But just so you know, this is the statement, the policy, and if you want to look at the complete academic policy for academic ethics or academic honesty, you can look at it here. But I will just say, and I'm telling you this, that I have not had anybody who has been a problem. I don't expect there to be a problem, but if there is, we can talk about it and take the appropriate steps, although I don't expect that's going to be the case. So I just want you to know about this and know about the lockdown browser. The last thing to do is to actually take the exam, and it's not appearing in the window yet or in the module. It will appear tomorrow. And the exam, the way I set it up, has two parts. We have a part for multiple choice and a part for the problems. So this is an exam that's broken down into two parts. So you'll take the multiple choice portion and complete it. Then you'll take the problem portion and complete it. Both of those portions added together will make up your exam score. If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to reach out to me and let me know. But basically, like I said, the exam will open tomorrow, Wednesday, February the 2nd, and will close on Sunday, February the 14th. I hope you have a great day and a great week. We'll look forward to seeing your work on this first exam.